I would like to, to use the time for my introductory remarks to speak about the Abrahamic Accords, and I will allow other subjects that are related, etc. I'm sure that they will come up in various questions and various comments that we will hear. It's been quite, we've been on fast forward for the last 6 weeks now, since the announcement of the Abrahamic Accords, since we've had that three-way phone call between President Trump, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed. And we've been working really, and for the region, this has really been quite a new, exciting, challenging development. And I want to take this issue more and sort of look at it from the way we see it here in the UAE, what potential we see, what are the prospects for it, and so on and so forth. And I think that is, sort of my starting point. I think the relations with Israel have started, UAE relations with Israel developed very slowly. And in the last few years, with our campaign for IRENA, the Sustainable Energy Organization, inviting Israel to be a participant in Expo, our ideas more or less about a more normal relations with Israel began to crystallize. This is not something that happened overnight. But I think we understood more and more that it is essential for us to sort of divide the political disagreement from other areas of cooperation. We will have better relations. There will be better prospects for stability in the region if we were able to come and say, yes, we disagree on the Palestinian issue, but we need to talk about it. And at the same time, there are many, many other areas that we feel brings us together, many functional areas, many areas of how we want to see the region develop, etc. I think this is something that took us, that was more of a learning curve. This is not something that happened overnight. And we could see that our relationship with Israel would actually arrive at a point where we will have normal diplomatic relations with Israel, where we will see tourists coming and going, and we will see various areas of cooperation activity, and where we will all look at the region that it is in the benefit of all to look at a region of stability and prosperity. I remember when John Kerry, former Secretary of State, put his last sort of effort at reaching an agreement between the Palestinians and Israelis, we commissioned a study. And that study that was commissioned by the UAE was really to look at the benefits of peace for the Israeli economy. And we looked at several sectors, and we thought that this would be one of our contributions to Secretary Kerry's arguments about the benefits of peace. At the time, the Israelis felt quite secure, the economy was doing well, safety and security were in quite a good state, and so on and so forth. But clearly, the study showed that Israel basically has very normal and fruitful relations, not with its neighbors or within its second-tier neighbors, but beyond. And if it had these relations with its neighbors, there would be a very, very positive impact on these sectors in terms of GDP, etc. And this was, more of a contribution for us. The UAE is a country that looks towards the future, a country that recognizes that if we don't really break taboos, if we don't think strategically, the region is doomed, and the region will not really be able to compete in the coming decades if long-held attitudes of animosity and demonization continue to hold us. So this was something that was happening. Why now? Many people are asking, why now? I think here the suspension of annexation was that one opportunity where what would have happened maybe 2 years down the road or a year down the road became very realistic and very possible right now. And what sort of got us into a frenzy of work in order to put everything together. And, the Americans played an important role. And really, on the issue of Arab-Israeli peace, Palestinian-Israeli peace, never discount the American role. The Americans will always be interested, and the Americans will always play an important and constructive role. And I think this is what they did here. It was really putting all these ingredients together. The sort of developing and evolving relationship between the UAE and Israel over the years. How can that relationship really take a more formal and institutional framework, but at the same time, this worry about annexation of 30% of the West Bank and the effect that this will have really on a two-state solution was something that was not only concerning to the Palestinians and to the Arabs, but was also very concerning to many international players, and among them many of the European players who were just, scratching their heads over what to do. So I think these two things allowed us to come out with a formula of establishing relations with Israel. Now, some people argue that Prime Minister Netanyahu backtracked in some of his statements, but then came back on this. And how can you actually ensure that this suspension is going to be adhered to? And I say, really, you have to separate how states talk, and it's about commitments of states, and about really addressing your own sort of public support. And I think this is something that the UAE understands well. And I think on the other hand, the presence also of the Americans as being more or less the interlocutor here and the sort of glue that's brought us all together, the magnet that's brought us together, is, in my opinion, a guarantee. And we believe also that you have to allow for a chance for the two-state solution to work, and this will also require the Palestinians to re-engage. Again, when the Trump plan was unfolded, the Palestinians felt that the plan was heavily skewed against them and against everything that they wanted, and was a further undermining of their aspiration to an independent state, etc. And even in those days, and I remember being in the Arab League, we were one of the few Arab countries that urged the Palestinians publicly, understanding how difficult the situation was from their perception, but urged them to communicate, urged them to be on the negotiating table. That was extremely important. And I think this remains to be our view. We participated at the economic conference in Bahrain out of the same sort of realization that you do need to communicate. And our ambassador to Washington, Yusuf Al-Ateba, attended the unveiling of the Trump plan also to emphasize the same point. I mean, ultimately, it's not us who will decide what is the shape of this final peace. It will be the Palestinians and it'll be the Israelis. But I think that clearly, from a perspective of a country in the region that has been very worried about the status quo, being very worried about the sort of frozen cycle, no movement, for us, engagement is essential. And as we say that, it is also essential to come and say, and ultimately this is also part and parcel of our thinking on Israel. I mean, again, you know, this is something that we've been talking about. We have evolved as many Arab nations, and we've realized that no communication channels with Israel over the years has not yielded results. And in reality, it is when you communicate that you're able to reach some sort of agreement. Sometimes it's difficult, it's tough negotiation, but at least it brings some sort of agreements here. And we've seen that in the case of Egypt and Israel. We've seen it in the case of Jordan and Israel, and indeed in the case of the Oslo Accords in 1993 with the Palestinian normalization of their relations with Israel. Now, why did the UAE do this? Is it just because of the suspension of annexation? No, of course not. I think, first of all, this is a sovereign decision of the UAE about us also. You know, I mean, over the years, we've seen that it is extremely important to challenge the narrative of demonization and the narrative of religious extremism in the region. And the only way for you to challenge that is to embrace the other, and embrace, you know, other religions that live in our region, whether they're Christian or Jewish or Hindu or others, as we are actually in the UAE. And I think it was normal that what we would do domestically would also overlap with what we do regionally. And I see that this is extremely important from this perspective. I think also another angle was Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed's view that you had to take calculated strategic risks sometimes. If you're not able to break walls in the region, then you will be very much a prisoner of those walls, of your own walls. And it was essential to break many of these, you know, considered taboos or considered red lines or walls. And I think he's been very good at that, really. I mean, this is very different, which was the invitation for the Pope, for a Catholic Pope to come to the heartland of the Muslim world in the Arabian Peninsula. It was unthinkable a few years ago, but this is something that you did, it happened, and the region is better off today. And I think the same way the region is still very much polarized, while the whole world is actually celebrating the Abrahamic Accords, the region is polarized around it. We have to admit that. But I think that this polarization is really now in our hands and the Israeli hands, to show that our view to peace is not going to be transactional and tactical, but our view is going to be strategic. It will bring a greater cooperation, and cooperation is not only about investment and money and trade, but this will be a civilizational cooperation. It'll be about technology, it'll be about health, it'll be about travel and tourism. And to be honest, we're very also thrilled by the enthusiasm of the Israeli public with this, with these accords. And I've said before, and I say it again, that we also want a warm peace. We want a peace where everybody is a winner. But for us to do that, I think it is essential that this peace is looked at strategically. And we need to not think of it in a very transactional way. And I feel that, when Yusuf Al-Ateba wrote with regards to suspension of annexation, we were very encouraged that Israelis actually listened. Why would an ambassador of a moderate country in the region with no borders with Israel warn about annexation here? And I think this is the sort of positive impact that we want to make with Israel about the necessity of reaching what I would call sustainable solutions, really, in order for a two-state solution to be achieved and to flourish in a region that is looking towards the future. Now, many people ask, is this really a new geostrategic construct in the region? I don't really see it as such. This is not really targeted at Iran from our view. I see that Iran, through its very sort of aggressive policies over the last 20, 30 years, has made this more possible. But I don't really see it targeted at Iran. I see that if we are able to enlarge the circle of peace, we are able to address the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people. And if we are able also to secure Israel as a normal country, thriving in peace with other countries around it, I think these are the bigger goals, really, that we need to really look at. I look at many of the reactions from the rest of the world, and I see a lot of enthusiasm for this deal. In the Arab world is being polarized, to be honest. And we haven't lost a single friend. We haven't gained a single foe, because people have been sort of dug in their positions like it's a modern day Battle of the Somme or something. So really, this is an agreement that has all the possibilities of breaking the cycle of inertia that we have seen in the region. And we can all do very well, but we've got to work. Many of the Arab countries that have a relationship with Israel that is looking at these relationships with a very positive perspective. We need to work strategically. And of course, the Palestinians, we need to also understand that there is an opportunity here. The sort of static position that they have adopted over the last 2, 3, 4 years has not really served them well. I know that this is not easy, but the possibilities are there. And I think this is what we need to work on. There's also been discussion, and I'll end up there, and then we're going to go to the comments and questions, etc. And I hope they will cover some other areas also. There's also been discussion about the F-35s and whether this has really been our main, or one of our main really aspirations from this agreement. And for me, I don't see that as a major area of our concern when we came looking at the deal. We understood that this deal will make the pathway easier, but that wasn't really the main consideration, because you have to think that there are no new weapon requirements by the UAE for the last year or so. All these requirements are older requirements, and we feel that the UAE, which has been a very honorable and strong partner, burden sharing in Afghanistan, burden sharing in Kosovo and other areas, burden sharing against the operations against ISIS, and definitely also burden sharing in the NATO operation on Libya. The UAE deserves to get its the requirements to modernize its military, its very capable military on the merits, we feel. And I think this is the way that we are looking at it. This is the sort of overall introduction to where we were. We're very, very hopeful that this will be a strategic breakthrough. We're very hopeful that this will be a very beneficial relationship for us and for Israel. We are saying that all the stars are aligned for an excellent, warm relationship with Israel, but we have to think strategic, and the Israelis have to think strategic, and we have to build a model of a bilateral relationship that will help in our combined desire to make the region more stable and make the region more prosperous. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Anwar, for that presentation. It's great to have you back at the Asia Society. We regard you as a friend of the institution, and it's particularly appropriate that you be speaking with our American international audience now, given the recency of the ceremony which took place on the White House lawns. And thank you for giving us your contextualization of the attitudes which the UAE government brought to bear in what is an historically significant decision. And for those who are listening and watching this webinar at present, you have an opportunity, of course, to raise questions. They can be put through to our staff and they'll pass them on to us. We'll have this conversation through until the top of the hour, which leaves us with about 30 minutes to go. Let me begin, Anwar, with a pretty simple question. Who came up with the title Abrahamic Accords? Abraham would scratch his head sometimes, having been the father of three particularly troublesome tribes, if you like, Jewish people, the Arab peoples, and now all of us Christians as well. But the whole idea behind the Abrahamic Accords, does this come primarily out of the White House, or was it a collective view? I'm interested in the origins of the term.
Yeah. Well, again, I don't take any claim here. I think we were working on details of a very anodyne name. And then, our contacts during this period with the Israelis was mainly through Washington. So, yes, it came from Washington, but from who exactly, I have no idea.
Okay. Well, I'm sure Abraham's pretty happy about it, but it's good to see the tribes working closely together on this. Tell me, you've already referred, Anwar, to the differing reactions across the Arab world, and that none of the reactions particularly surprised you, given that, as you said, some attitudes have been entrenched, a bit like the Battle of the Somme, and that trench warfare moves very slowly, if we reflect on the history of that time. I noticed that the matter was discussed in the Arab League. your response to the posture taken by the Arab League and more broadly across the Arab world. Were there any particular sensitivities with the Jordanians? I'd be interested in your take on the feelings on the part of your Arab brothers around the region.
Well, again, I would say that we've had a lot of good support, constructive, whether it was public or not public. I think everybody understood our reasoning. There was good support from most of the Arab countries, as I said, whether public or not public. Because again, you have to remember, Kevin, we took a decision while we were negotiating the details and looking at the details. We took a decision not to inform anybody. So it was really between us and the Americans and the Israelis. And we took a decision not to put any of our friends and inform them. And the reason was, number one, to avoid leaks. And number two is we did not really want them to take the burden of our decision, whichever way it went. And I think this was a surprise to many of the countries in the region, and indeed many of the European countries, etc. So in my opinion, the responses that came later were quite positive. I mean, there is anger in the social media, but the social media in the Arab world is already, a battlefield of angry people about all different issues and so on and so forth. So that is something I think that really did not change. I would say that within the Arab context, countries did not have to adopt our stance, but they understood it and they understood our reasoning. And some of them would go further and understand that this is something that can actually or has the potential of being helpful. And we did not really press any of our friends in sort of true Arab mannerism of asking for clear positions on something that we know that they are grappling with and considering a very emotive subject really in Arab society and between Arab states.
You indicated before, Anwar, you'd been pleasantly surprised by the positive nature of the response in Israeli public opinion. And you also pointed to some earlier work going back probably 4 or 5 years now that you'd done in the context of the Kerry Plan on the potential benefits of peace in the region more generally from the perspective of Israel's economic interests. Many of us have been having those conversations with Bibi Netanyahu for 10 years or more, but seemingly with very little effect. Our Emirati friends perhaps have cracked the door open somewhat. Tell me, what's your sense of the potentiality of turning this turbulent region, which has been stuck, again, your good analogy, in the trench warfare of the Battle of the Somme for such a long period of time? Do you have a sense of optimism about turning this region into a wider economic entity of 300 million plus people, whereby not just the Israelis benefit and the Emiratis benefit, but the entire Arab world benefits? Your thoughts on the economic trajectory?
Well, again, it's not going to be easy to start with, because I don't think the issue is only the Israeli-Palestinian issue. We have issues of failed states, we have issues of lack of governance, we have issues of extremism, and in the Arab world, more and more, we have a concern with Iran and Turkey sort of claiming areas or zones of interest in a very weak Arab system. So it's not 1 or 2 or 3 issues. But having said that, and looking at the various complications here, it doesn't mean we have to stand still. I think that we are, for example, let's say that positive signs that we see today in Iraq of reclaiming the sovereign state of Iraq and the capacity of the state. This can be very encouraging because Iraq is a major Arab state that has not really been functioning for a decade or so. Ending the war in Yemen is something that is important, and I think interestingly here, all the major parties want to end the war. It is now the local Yemeni parties that are looking at the war tactically and trying to improve their conditions in a futile attempt really to gain a few kilometers here or gain, a little town here or there, rather than think strategically. Developments in Libya recently are quite encouraging. So I would say that they are little small things, but I think ultimately also, again, without praising the UAE or without using this time to advertise for the UAE, I think success stories such as the UAE also embolden others. We've, as you mentioned, we've got 200,000 Palestinians living in the UAE, for example. I think that's the number if you look at Palestinians who are there with their own documents or Palestinians who have another nationality. And for them, these are people who have been here for decades. Their kids have gone to the best schools here and abroad because we've provided also for this very, successful group of Palestinians. We've provided also shelter in terms of stability, and we've provided also for them opportunity. So in my opinion, if we really try and approach this through a holistic, roadmap, I think the details of the issues are very difficult, and we will not arrive at this sort of better regional grouping or better regional economy. But if we are able to look at some of the critical issues and try to sort of uncork them and try to deconstruct them and rebuild them, and I think our agreement with Israel falls into that. It's not the ultimate really solution, but it helps. And I think with that, we will need at some stage to engage with Iran, for example. And that engagement with Iran will be necessary. But Iran also has to see that its own aggressive policy in the region is not helping others bring Iran on board. And it was interesting in following translations of the Iranian press that there was an article by an Iranian political observer who said that it is our aggressive policies that has led many of the Gulf states to keep a distance from us. It's not their choice only to keep a distance from us, but it is also our, 24-hour-a-day rhetoric about, our aggressive policies and controlling Arab capitals, etc. I think the same thing applies for Turkey now, which is really emerging as a major, unwanted, really, regional influence. I mean, here you had a very good relationship that respected sovereignty, and you had, billions of dollars of trade and tourists and I don't know what. But I think at some stage, the Turks put ideology first, the ideology of that party. And that ideology harks back to Ottoman, supposedly golden age, and, sort of looked at the Arab regional system and saw that the Arab regional system was very soft, and decided to, sort of increase Turkey's influence there. Now, the result has really been disastrous for Turkey, because Turkey is overextended all the way from 5,000 soldiers on Iraqi territory to Syria, to Libya, to the Eastern Mediterranean. And this involvement has an economic cost. This involvement has a reputational cost. So I would say that I am not very optimistic that the region can turn the corner with a very solid game plan. But I think these small, well, they're not small, but these sort of agreements and our ability to end conflict in several areas will actually allow us to create a more prosperous and stable region.
As you said before, this is now a dynamic game and not a static game. That's what strikes me as the core element here. And that you said also before that this is strategic rather than transactional, by which I assume you mean that once the door is open to dealing comprehensively with Israel and the Israelis, then other things will flow from that over time, strategic and economic and the rest. You've obviously just referred to the Iranians. Do you think the Iranians were surprised by the Abrahamic Accords? Do you think as a result of them that we will see a change in any way in Iranian strategy in the region? Will there be a hardening of Iranian policies directly and indirectly towards the Emirates and the Gulf monarchies?
Well, again, were they surprised? I think they were surprised. I think they were counting that most Arab states, as many other states in the Gulf, for example, have a relationship that's not formal with Israel, and that this will continue to be the trend. So I don't think that they saw the boldness here, and they did not see the opportunity here and how important it was to sort of fast forward this because of the suspension of annexation. I don't think they saw it. I think right now it is the Iranians are, the Iranians have too many blips on their screen right now. And I think we should be able to come and say that Iran needs to engage. And we need to engage also with Iran. And I think this is what's been offered also by Washington. You know, the whole idea of wait and see, which has been the Iranian policy for the last 3 years, is not really bringing any conclusions. It shows you that this is a system that can't really decide how to approach things. So as soon as you say, no, let's wait to find out whether anything is going to happen with regards to President Trump's impeachment. No, that didn't happen. Let's wait till, I don't know, the next step. Let's wait to the election. And I think this has been more a characterization, really, of Iranian policy on approaching this issue. In my opinion, we are saying again that Iran's aggressive stance have helped somewhat for this deal to happen. But this deal with Israel is in no way targeted towards Iran. And I think Iran should take that as our official approach and official policy, and should come and say that I should look at this not as a threat in order to galvanize my normal base of support. Your normal base of support is already galvanized. There is no reason for you to galvanize them further. But I think you need to look at this and say, is this an opportunity really to build and create new relations where we are able to, all of us really, have more security in our nation states, more prosperity in dealing with each other, and also augmenting the prospects of a two-state solution. I hope that's what they hear. I hope that is the way that they will operate. On Turkey's side, on the other hand, Turkey today receives about 2019 number 600,000 Israeli tourists. Turkey has daily flights between Istanbul and Tel Aviv. Turkey does $2 to $3 billion of trade with Israel. It has an embassy. It has an FTA, free trade agreement with Israel, as far as I know. So for Turkey to come and say that the UAE is just normalized and the UAE has done this and the UAE has done that, this is really political opportunism of the highest order. So I think this doesn't really convince anybody.
One of our audience members has asked a question about where to now for the Palestinians. You indicated before that the posture taken by the PA, the Palestinian Authority, for some time now has been, shall we say, static in its engagement with Israel, and of course there are the internal divisions with Gaza. The deal itself, that is the Abrahamic Accords, have made one material contribution. You've referred to it already, which is Netanyahu's previously stated position moving towards annexation of the West Bank. And this became a red line issue for the Emiratis in dealing with these negotiations with Israel. And so, if you like, the prospect of a Palestinian state continues to remain active because the West Bank continues to exist as a semi-viable entity. Looking forward, the question that I've been put is, do you see opportunities for movement in Ramallah in terms of, shall we say, a fresh approach to negotiating statehood with the Israelis, particularly given how hardline Netanyahu has been on this question for so long?
Well, again, I think what are the opportunities here? I think this gives the Palestinians the opportunity to reunite. The rift between the PA and Gaza, Hamas, and all the others has been quite problematic and disastrous for the Palestinians. And various efforts by Egypt and others to try and consolidate and reunite and recreate the institutions have failed. So the opportunity to reunite is there. But I think they should not reunite in repeating the same old rhetoric. I think they should reunite in trying to re-engage and trying to understand that the same sort of dug-in positions of no negotiation, no dealing with the American administration, etc., is not going to go anywhere. I think that is the first thing that I see. The second thing that I see is for the Palestinians to understand that their real supporters are the moderate Arab states. It is countries like Egypt, it is countries like Jordan, it is countries like Morocco, it's countries like Saudi Arabia, and indeed it's countries like the Gulf states. These are the countries where a majority of the Palestinian diaspora lives, a majority of the Palestinians have found second homes and support their families and keep supporting really a very positive view of how they want to see the future. So basically, I think further radicalizing the Palestinian position is not going to help anybody. I think a more sort of thoughtful re-examination is needed right now. And that thoughtful re-examination has to entail a return to negotiations. I don't see any reason why the Palestinians should negate their national goals of a two-state solution, an independent Palestinian state, and Jerusalem, East Jerusalem as their capital. I don't see any reason why they should give that up. And they will have a lot of Arab support here. But they need to sit down. They need to sit down because the history of this conflict has been a history of realities overtaking possibilities and proposals. And I think this has always been the case. And if the Palestinians allow realities to sort of diminish the options that they have in the next few years, this will be a real disaster.
So the final status questions remain on the table. And I think if I draw an inference from what you have said, the question is for the Palestinians to re-engage. And I assume that given your new diplomatic relationship with Israel, you'd be encouraging the Israelis to do the same, Anwar.
Exactly. I think we, first of all, we're starting a relationship with Israel from ground zero. There's hardly much really in terms of a relationship. We have no formal agreements. We have no functional agreements. Any Israeli delegation that comes here has to have a special permission, special clearance. Building this relationship, we want to build a relationship of trust. And we want to build a relationship of mutual benefit. And we want to build a relationship that looks towards the future, not a transactional relationship. If these are our goals, it means that we will also build the leverage with it. It doesn't start with leverage. Leverage is really a byproduct of the first things that I said. So in my opinion, that once we pass the sulking mode of the Palestinians, we will be able to help them more. With the Israelis, I would say that with more trust, with more relationship, with more interaction, with more communication, you also get something called leverage. It's like somebody that you know, that trusts you, that you know that you can have a private conversation, you can whisper in his ear, and so on and so forth. And I think this is something that we will also be able to do. And you have to, realize that this is something that the Jordanians have, this is something that the Egyptians have at varying degrees. But here, we don't have a border with Israel. We didn't fight a war with Israel. We don't have land rights. We don't have this and that. So in my opinion, this is a relationship that is going to be quite a warm relationship. And this is why I keep urging the Israelis to think of this relationship as a strategic one, a long-term relationship, and not transactional. Because if we build it together along these lines, other than that being beneficial, I think we will be able to talk to each other. We will be able to influence each other's views with the other party, knowing that you are giving them a fair, honest advice. And I think this is something that we are seeking. I am confident that moving forward and after a short intermediate period, we will be able to help the Palestinians more because of what we will be building with the Israelis. But I am also confident that if we and the Israelis are able to build a relationship of trust, we will be able also to influence them with a fair opinion, with an honest opinion, with an opinion that they understand comes from an interlocutor and a partner that has looked at the relationship and looked at it strategically.
My last question, I promise, on all this, which is, so when do you hope to have an ambassador in Tel Aviv? We're talking about weeks, months. Who's it going to be? Give us an inside tip.
Very soon. We will have. I mean, again, I think, I'll be guessing, but I would say in 2020. So let's just say that, COVID permitting, so on and so forth. I'm hoping, last quarter this year, first quarter next year, but this is a sort of time frame. Again, we still haven't really discussed, who is this ambassador, who will be our ambassador, etc. We have a lot of capable diplomats. We have a lot of capable people who will be able to push this relationship forward. And I'm sure we'll find a good fit.
That's good. Turning slightly broader afield, a number of our questioners are also interested in Yemen. You've spoken before at length, Anwar, about the need for a political solution, a political settlement in Yemen. You've also today indicated that the external parties, or at least a number of them, are wishing to see that happen, and the internal parties are now positioning for advantage. If you've got your crystal ball, how do you see Yemen unfolding in the year ahead?
Well, again, there's a lot of sort of false hopes, and I don't want to fall into that. But clearly, every time I see Martin Griffith in the region, we have full agreement with him. Every time I look at how he assesses the Saudi effort to support the Yemenis get to a comprehensive ceasefire and engage in political discussion, he's very positive about these Saudi efforts. So clearly, my assessment, and this is not just an assessment, but based on information, we have right now a regional climate that is calling for an immediate ceasefire in Yemen and for the Yemeni parties to engage politically. That is basically the regional climate. Nothing regionally or internationally is really impeding the Yemenis' ability to agree to a ceasefire and to engage in a political agreement. Now, what are the considerations of the parties? The Houthis are emboldened by their control of the north of Yemen and are insistent that they want to gain the city and province of Marib. So they are, their sort of thinking is, we'll think about a ceasefire after we achieve that goal. The government of Yemen is working very hard not to allow the Houthis control that, but at the same time is sort of not engaging with Martin's efforts in the way it should, and is trying to avoid a creation of a cabinet that will involve the Southerners. The Southerners want to implement the Riyadh agreement, but are not willing to pull many of their forces until a new cabinet is formed, and they are involved there. And then you've got the regional players in Yemen, the main regional players, not the marginal ones, want to actually see a comprehensive ceasefire today before tomorrow. But I think right now, my assessment is it is the Yemeni parties who need to really see the folly of these, what I would call tactical gains that they are seeking. And these are gains that might take 6 and 8 months to either gain or lose. And I think this is all lost time, really. And I think we need to move very comprehensively and quickly to a ceasefire and then move to a negotiating table. And once I'm quite convinced that once everybody's around the new negotiating table, many of the psychological barriers between Yemeni and Yemeni will actually break down. And I think this is the way that I see it today.
Well, thank you, Anwar. You've been very generous with your time so far. I should conclude, given our time is now up for this public session, just by saying you referred before to your many capable UAE diplomats. One of them, of course, is your permanent representative to the UN. Tell me, on the UN Security Council, what sort of contribution would the UAE make? What's the mission statement?
Well, again, I think that the UAE will bring a lot of experience and expertise to the Security Council from our region. We're a country that has a very successful national narrative, and it's quite unique. It's a country with many nationalities, a country that actually has a positive narrative from a very difficult region. So I think that this is something that we will bring forward. I think we're also a country that has worked quite consistently, really, with international efforts and have experience on these. Our Balkan experience in stabilization is something that is, very much part of our national narrative, our understanding of regional issues, and clearly also we're a trailblazer in terms of closing rifts, really, between ethnicities and between religions and so on and so forth. So I think this is also something that is essential and important in our in who we are and how we see ourselves. Furthermore, we have experience in working in various regional organizations in the Gulf, in the Arab world, within the Islamic world, and beyond. And I think sort of multinational work has not been a mystery to us. But again, we've played a role in various areas in sustainable energy in the region. We've been a leader in human trafficking in the region, by one of the first countries to acknowledge that this is a real problem and to put a national plan to address it. A hydrocarbon economy that has really been at the front line, really, of introducing solar energy and sustainable energy in the region. So we've been quite open, really, to many of the ideas, and we have not been sort of shut down in our own small Middle East cocoon or Arab cocoon. And I think this brings, a sort of Arab and Middle East expertise, but with an open mind. And I think this will be helpful in our candidacy.
Well, Dr. Anwar, we thank you very much for your participation in this public event with the Asia Society in New York. We wish you well in the new relationship with Israel, and we wish you well in terms of the UNSC as well. Thank you for joining us, and I thank you also for being willing to stay on for our separate private session with Asia Society trustees. But that concludes our public event, and we will now conclude the webinar here, and we will catch you soon. Thank you so much, Dr. Anwar.